Kaylee, and today I am talking about all the books that I read in July. I read a lot of books in July. I mean, like a lot. Please do subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and follow me on Instagram and Goodreads and Storygraph and all the places. Things got a little bit crazy in July. I got a little bit behind in some of my summer reading plans, and so July was catch-up month. And then I also had Jane Austen July that I was reading books for. There were a couple things I was supposed to read in June, and then I didn't, so then I ended up reading those in July. So yeah, July was insane. I read 62 books in July. Yes, 62 is the final number. Oh dear. I did the math twice to make sure that I really got the right number of books. I read 4 classics, 1 historical fiction mystery, 1 sci-fi, 8 nonfiction, 6 children's books, 31 picture books, 7 graphic novels, and 4 middle grade books. And all that adds up to 62 books. Now, granted, half of those were picture books, but still, 31 picture books is nothing to sneeze at. Okay, we're gonna start with the classics because I know that's what you guys really care about. I also reread Emma for Jane Austen July, but I read it as an audiobook and I read it in Spanish. I found this really great Spanish audiobook of Emma. I loved the narrator. It was so interesting revisiting my favorite Jane Austen novel, but in Spanish in another language. I loved it so much. I've done a whole nother video all about Emma, and I loved it. Be sure to go over and check out that video if you want to know some more of my thoughts about Emma. And I read Anthony Trollope's The Way We Live Now. One of my goals for this year was to read more Trollope. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to tackle this 900-something page book in July when I already have so much other reading going on. But it was absolutely fascinating. The scope of this book is just so huge, so colossal. I've done a whole nother video all about The Way We Live Now. There's so much to talk about with that book. Of course, it had to have a separate review video of its own. Be sure to go over and check that out. I also read Christian Mythmakers. This is a nonfiction book about different Christian authors through the centuries and how their use of imaginative fantasy and myths have pointed people towards spiritual truths in Christianity. So it starts out with Dante's Divine Comedy. It goes through John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, all the way through J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Madeleine L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time series. I loved this book so much. It got me really inspired. I gave it 5 stars, absolutely incredible. Be sure to go over and check out my video all about it, especially if you love Christian fantasy like Tolkien and Lewis and stuff like that. I also read an adaptation of a play from Euripides, Iphigenia in Aulis. I'm not quite sure. Aulis, I'm not quite sure how to say that. This is an adaptation of the play that then also has some illustrations included. This was sent to me from the publisher in exchange for a free and honest review. And it starts out at the beginning of the Trojan War. Paris has run away with Helen. The army is waiting on the shore to pursue her, but the winds are unfavorable, and so the army can't sail across the sea. And Agamemnon is told by a priest that he needs to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to the gods, and then they will have a favorable wind to be able to sail to war. So he wrestles with the decision, he quarrels with his brother, he lies to his wife, the armies threaten treason, and Achilles vows to protect the young maiden. It is very dramatic. I super enjoyed this adaptation. I really liked the illustrations that just bring all this dramatic emotion to life. I gave it 5 stars. This is really a great adaptation of this Greek tragedy. And I've also been reading through the Jane Austen mystery series by Stephanie Barron. This month for Jane Austen July, I read Jane and His Lordship's Legacy, which is book number 8 in the series. This series follows Jane Austen as the main character, and it follows the basic history of her real life and people she knew and places she visited and where she lived and things that she did. And it even uses little snippets from her letters, things that she actually wrote as part of her dialogue sometimes, or sometimes it'll steal dialogue from her novels and then put that into the dialogue of the story. So it's a fun little nod to some things that are really true. I started out reading this series years ago. I have most of the physical books, but since I've started listening to the audiobooks, I've really taken off with my reading of these books. The series is narrated by Kate Redding, and I just love her narration, and I feel like I'm just enjoying it even more because she brings it to life in the audiobook. I'm actually enjoying the audiobooks more than I ever enjoyed reading it physically. So each of the stories follows Jane Austen in real events of her life, but then she's also solving murder mysteries. So it's a really fun blend of actual history and then a murder mystery fiction. The murder mysteries in each of these are really good, like the mystery itself and the different clues and how Jane figures things out and stuff. In every single book is really, really intriguing. It really captures your attention. And the writing style really mimics that type of Jane Austen Regency style very well, I think. So this, number 8 in the series, Jane and His Lordship's Legacy, I gave this one 4 stars. I also read a children's book, The Story of Fred Rogers. This is a biography book for new readers. I loved the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood TV show when I was a kid, and it was really lovely to read just this short little children's book, you know, all about Mr. Rogers' life and how he started his TV show for kids. He was a wonderful Christian, and it's just incredible to see how he inspired children. His faith in God is such a cornerstone of the good work that he did, teaching children that God loves them. The writing is concise because it is, you know, a book for kids, but it gives a really good outline of Mr. Rogers' life, and I gave it 5 stars. I read the graphic novel Operatic. Charlie is a girl who is exploring what music truly means to her, and when one of her teachers at school introduces them to different styles of music, and Charlie hears opera, it really touches a chord very deeply in her heart. There was a boy in her class who was being bullied so badly that he did not return to school. And now Charlie is really hoping that the class can use music to repair what has been broken and to bring their class together again. I really loved the artwork. I loved the positive messages in this book. And of course, I'm a musician, so you know I loved all that about music. I gave it 4 stars, really lovely. And I read Emma and the Blue Genie. Emma finds a bottle washed up on the seashore, and inside is a genie, but he has lost all his magic because another genie has stolen his magic nose ring. And so now he can't grant any wishes until Emma goes on a quest, an adventure to help him get back his nose ring. The magic is enchanting. I just loved the funny storyline. This is an absolute delight. I gave it 4 stars. All the rest of the books in this video are books that I received for free from a publisher in exchange for a free and honest review. One of the graphic novels that I read was Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, The Death of Nancy Drew. So in this one, Nancy Drew is dead. She was tracking down the last remnants of a criminal gang when her car ran off the road into a river. And the Hardy brothers are arguing about whether or not it was just an accident or whether she was run off the road and murdered. One of them begins investigating her death and starts to uncover some clues. This was really interesting because, you know, you think of, Nancy Drew is so wholesome and everything, but oh my goodness, there's like suicide and drug cartels and backdoor deals and dirty politicians, and there's an assassin hiding in plain sight. It was not too scary and it was not too dark, so I really enjoyed it. It was just that right level of like creepy mystery, danger, adventure stuff, but it was not too scary for me, so I super enjoyed it. And I really loved that there's that nostalgia for the whole Nancy Drew Hardy Boys. The Bobbsey twins even make an appearance. So we get all of that great nostalgia for these childhood books that we knew and loved, but it's reimagined for an older audience, and I just super enjoyed it. 4 stars, loved it. I read the middle grade book, The World's Worst Time Machine. At the garage sale of a famous scientist, Liam finds a cardboard box which is labeled World's Worst Time Machine, and he buys it and takes it home and fits some wires together and turns it on. His friend Elsa warns him not to mess with time travel, but of course he's too excited and he doesn't listen, and it's a complete disaster. He gets mixed up with the wrong Thomas Edison, and a dastardly gang of gangsters. This whole book is just so hilarious and wacky. The plot twists are just all over the place, and it's very timey-wimey. And it does set up for a sequel, so I can't wait for the next book to come out, because this had me giggling and laughing all the way through. It was so much fun. 4 stars, loved it. I read Working from Home, Slacker to Superstar. I do work from home. I mean, I partially work in other places, but I partially work from home. Working from home has its own list of benefits and troubles. It can be tempting to just waste your time with distractions, and it can be difficult to say, okay, no, this is working time, and then this is, private home life time. So this book gives some really great advice for how to remain focused, how to establish a good working routine at home. And I really liked that this book includes sections about eating healthfully and getting enough exercise and making sure that you have a social life, get out of the house and go do things and see people, because it can be so easy to get isolated when you're just at home all the time. I really enjoyed it and got some good advice, and I gave it 4 stars. I read the graphic novel Breath of a Giant. 2 sisters embark on a long journey to the wastelands of the north looking for a giant. Legend says that if you can kill one of the giants, you could capture its strength in a magic stone, and you could use that magic to bring someone who is dead back to life. And the 2 sisters want to bring their mother back to life. However, they are not the only ones searching for the giants. There are others who want to steal that power as well. This book is really heartbreaking, but it's also hopeful. The 2 sisters are dealing with this horrible grief of the loss of their mother, and along their journey, they meet other people who are grieving as well. It's just an exploration of death and suicide and grieving and how we think about death. But I really liked that the book does end on a hopeful note. The sisters have to find a way to process their grief and decide how they want to live. I gave it 4 stars. I thought this was a really interesting exploration. And the adventure and the magic and all of that is really wonderful as well. I loved the beautiful art style. I don't know that I would recommend this to people to read. It is very heartbreaking, but if you're interested in that sort of exploration of different ways of thinking about death and processing grief, then I think you might enjoy it. I read a nonfiction book, Different, The Highly Sensitive Leadership Revolution. This book helps you to navigate some of the difficulties of being a highly sensitive person, which I am, and it helps you to embrace the strengths that come with high sensitivity. Instead of being stuck in limiting beliefs and anxiety, you can learn to act from a place of trust and courage and faith. I really like that this book focuses on trusting your intuition and living out your values. I tend to be a fearful person, and so it was lovely to just have this encouragement to live with courage, live with bravery. I gave it 4 stars. I read the graphic novel Bountiful Garden. A group of teenagers have been trained to terraform a distant planet. However, their spaceship stalls and they are awakened out of their cryo sleep. 10 years too early. They explore a nearby planet looking for supplies, and a mysterious presence begins to make itself known. This graphic novel was a little too scary for me. There is some gore and blood that was gross, and it was just a little too creepy. I liked the characters, but they didn't have a lot of depth. There just wasn't much time to kind of develop their personalities. And they mostly spend their time freaking out about all the stuff that's going wrong on their mission. The artwork is very dark. I found myself like squinting at the page trying to see like, what is that in the background? Is that a rock? Is that, I can't tell. I can't see anything in this scene. Like, what is happening? It's too dark, I can't tell. And it just got darker and darker and darker through the story, which I kind of appreciated. As the atmosphere darkens and their fear starts to take over, then the artwork actually gets darker and more shadowy and everything. But maybe they should have started out a little bit brighter, so when we got to the darker parts, I wasn't like squinting to see the page. I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't quite for me. It was a little too scary for me. One of the nonfiction that I read was Arborama. I specifically wanted this book to share with my nieces because they're all about nature and they want to learn about bugs and they want to learn about trees and stuff. So this has really beautiful illustrations and talks all about different types of trees, what their blooms look like, what their bark looks like, and how their root systems work, and all kinds of cool information about trees. I gave it 4 stars. Very cool. I read Mwikali and the Forbidden Mask. This is book 1 in the Intasimi Warriors books. On her first day at a new school, Mwikali discovers she had descended from a long line of Kenyans with mystical powers. She and her friends must find and destroy the Forbidden Mask before the powers of darkness can take over. I really loved this imaginative story. Mwikali and her friends all have different abilities, different powers, but they're just discovering their powers. Like, they don't really quite know how to use their powers yet, so they're learning and growing together. The plot is a little bit predictable. I saw most of the plot twists coming like a mile away, but it was still enjoyable, and there were a couple of things that surprised me. However, there were a few things in the plot that just felt way too coincidental and kind of just way too convenient. Instead of the plot unfolding naturally, it felt kind of forced. But I really liked the writing style, the pacing is good, the action is really exciting. I really liked the history, learning about Kenya and its culture and these different historical figures. However, I wish that the book had a glossary for words that are unfamiliar or in a different language. I wanted to learn more about the language, and there are a few words that are peppered here and there, and you can kind of figure out what it means just based on the context. I ended up looking up a lot of things on the internet, both about Kenyan historical figures and some about the language as well. I just got inspired to learn more about Kenya and its rich history. I gave this 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I also read Unplug and Play, the ultimate illustrated guide to roughhousing with your kids. This book tells us that children need a little rough housing play and some gentle wrestling to help them develop emotionally and mentally. Blowing off some steam with a little bit of rough housing can help them to regulate their emotions and learn to express themselves physically in healthy ways. There's a lot of research in this book showing that rough housing and just some silly play lights up parts of the brain that help make children smarter. It helps them to learn to interact with people and manage their impulses. So this book is full of silly games and fun things to try with your kids. Some of them are stuff that we all grew up doing, playing like the floor is lava, or making a fort out of pillows, or pretending to be a monster chasing the kid through the house. And there are plenty of activities that are perfect for sitting down together, no matter what your physical abilities might be. Some of them are a little more physically active and other ones are more for, if you had some sort of physical disability or you just don't have a lot of strength or a lot of energy. So you don't have to be physically strong to do these. There's something for everyone to try, no matter your age or your abilities. I gave this book 4 stars, and I actually marked some places of some fun little games that I want to try with my nieces. I also read some of these animal little books. I read Little Owl Rescue and The Puppy Who Ran Away, and what was the other one? The Homesick Kitten. These are just really cute pet rescue and animal rescue adventures. They're just adorable. They have lovely little illustrations. Such cute stories. And I read The Astronaut's Guide to Leaving the Planet, Everything You Need to Know from Training to Re-Entry. This is written by a real astronaut, and it has some really cool information all about the training and the International Space Station and what Earth looks like from space. And we start out with a little bit of the history of space travel and some of the first astronauts and cosmonauts. And we learn about some of these science skills that astronauts need to have. One of the cool things about this book is it actually has little activities for you to try to prepare you for your astronaut training. I gave this book 5 stars. Very cool. I read the graphic novel Lady Bird. This follows a girl named Mina who has an extraordinary ability to defy gravity. She can just kind of float around. Her blood, though, can cure any disease. So for most of her life, she has been held as a prisoner in a basement where a nurse comes and takes her blood every day. She escapes and she discovers that her family's past has more secrets than she had ever imagined. I gave this 4 stars. I really liked the storyline. It's just very, very mysterious. This is the first in a series, so some of the mystery is solved, but then new questions come up. I really liked the beautiful art style and the way that we get these little snippets from the past as she starts to discover some of the history of her family. Very cool story. This is one that I definitely want to continue reading more from that series. And I read Finding Faeries, Secrets for Attracting Magical Folk. This book has folk stories about fairies from all over the world. In each chapter, we also get a recipe or a craft that if you do that craft or make that recipe, then you might be able to attract some magical people. We might hopefully entice the fairies to visit us. You can make a Japanese fan or a flower crown or Chinese cherry dumplings. You can go on a gin treasure hunt or make a leaf basket or eat some pixie porridge. This book is a complete delight. There are games and music and instructions for creating your own fairyland party. I love that we get to learn legends from all over the world, and the illustrations are so pretty. I just love the delicate art style. I mean, this book is just so beautiful. I gave it 5 stars. I mean, this is really a lovely book. I read the second book in the Gustav and Henri graphic novel series. This one is Tiny Ant Island. Gustav and Henri are a couple of friends who get into some wacky adventures. They are so cute and funny. I love the art style, this little cartoony style in this book. There are actually 3 different stories in this book. In the first one, Gustav wants to go water rafting and he drags his friend Henri along for the ride, and they're caught in a storm and they're washed up on a desert island. But something strange is going on with this mysterious island. In the second story, Gustav loses a puzzle piece down the drain, and so they make themselves tiny and shrink themselves down so they can go down the drain and try to retrieve the puzzle piece. However, they are captured by sewer rats, and they have to think quickly if they're going to escape. And in the last story, Henri receives a strange letter from her agoraphobic aunt, and Gustav goes into detective mode to investigate. I was just giggling and laughing through the entire thing. These plot lines are really crazy. I gave it 5 stars. I loved the first Gustav and Henri book, and I loved this second volume as well. And of course, I read 31 picture books. I just don't have time to talk about all of them, but these are some of my favorites that I'm going to show you now. So many of these were really, really beautiful with just gorgeous illustrations. Just like, wow, this artist is incredible. And a lot of them were very informative. Some of them were nonfiction. And so I got to read about some history and some different stuff that was really cool. And a lot of them had really positive moral messages. And some of them were really silly and ridiculous and just very fun that literally made me giggle. Even as an adult, it was just so silly, it made me laugh. I really enjoyed all of the picture books that I read in July. Please leave me a comment and let me know what is one of your favorite books that you've been reading recently. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.